Hello, everybody. Once again, we're picking up in the book of James, our Sunday night Bible study on Wednesday night. And really enjoyed our past Sunday. We had drive-in church, and it was so good to see everyone. I know it's probably getting a little bit old to have to tune in on your device or your television or whatever to be able to be together. And I'm looking forward to the day when we're going to be able to come back together completely the way the Lord intended for the body to meet. Now, this Bible study, we're in the book of James, chapter 5. We have 2 more sessions in the book of James, and we'll complete the book. James chapter 5, starting in verse number 7 and going through verse 11. Okay, James 5, 7 through 11. And I've titled the Bible study, Remember Patience. And I've always heard, never ever pray and ask for patience because you're going to get it. And the one way, most of the time, that we learn patience is by going through hardship. We are forced to be in a situation or a circumstance where we have to have patience to be able to deal with it. And normally that's how we learn patience. But I believe we can pick up something from the book of James that might help us grab hold of it and not go through so much hardship. James chapter 5, verse 7 through 11. The word patient here, it says in James 5, 7, it says be patient. And that word patient in the original language, which I won't try to quote Greek or anything like that, that word there in the original language means to be long-spirited. That is, to be forbearing. In other words, patience is not just something that you have. Patience is something that you show in the middle of a hardship. It is to be forbearing. Maybe someone is kind of trying your patience. Someone is on your last nerve. And patience is something, an attitude, or it's something that it's an action that you perform at a time of difficulty. It means to suffer long, to be long-suffering. To endure. All of these different aspects is what patience is all about. So let's look in James chapter 5 and verse number 7. He says this, be patient then, brothers, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, and how patient he is for the autumn and the spring rains. Now, we're going to look at 4 different things that James is going to outline for us here that's dealing with the idea of patience. First of all, be patient, he says in verse 7, the Lord is coming. Be patient because the Lord will return. Now, that's a very comforting thought, to know that whatever I'm going through, I have the promise that Jesus is coming again. Jesus is coming back. Whatever I'm going through, this is just going to be temporary. It's going to pass. So I can hold on to my patience when I know that Jesus is coming again. He's coming to reward every believer. So whatever I'm going through, I know that the Lord is going to come and relieve me of that. He's going to take that away. I just have to be patient. We're going to live a life of service and purity until he comes. Be patient, brothers, the Lord's coming. So we need to live a life of service and a life of purity because he's coming. Now, spiritual patience is this. It is not a passive acceptance. Being spiritually patient doesn't mean that I just take everything as it comes along and I just say, whatever will be, and it's not that type of attitude. It is not passive at all. It is an active, a fighting, a standing endurance. We don't just lay down in the middle of a circumstance or situation that brings hardship. We continue to fight it. We continue to struggle. We continue to move forward. So patience is not just sitting down. Patience is active. And it is evidence of the fruit of the Spirit. In Galatians chapter 5, it says that part of the fruit of the Spirit is patience. That is something that as we mature in the Lord, that is a resource that we can grab hold of in a difficult time. And we find it by just trusting God. Whatever we're going through, just trusting Him. So we need to be patient because the Lord's going to return. But He also tells us in the rest of verse 7, the second half of verse 7, down through verse number 9, He says this, see how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, and how patient he is for the autumn and spring rains. You too, be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near. Don't grumble against each other, brothers, or you will be judged, for the judge is standing at the door. Notice he says, don't grumble against each other. That takes us back to that original definition of the word patience. That this patience is being forbearing. It's being long-suffering. It's cutting one another some slack. And so he tells us here, don't grumble against one another. Normally, when we're in a time of hardship, our number one response, the greatest temptation, is to act out, is to condemn, is to mouth off, it's to hurt, it's to wound, it's to take it out on somebody else. And he says, don't do that. In the middle of your suffering, remember other people may be suffering as well. And this idea here is to be patient like a farmer. It says, be patient for the Lord's returning, but be patient like a farmer. Now, a farmer doesn't just sit and wait for the harvest. There are many farmers in our church, and they work constantly. Even during the off season, when the land is just kind of laying there, they're working on equipment. When it's time for tilling up the soil, they're still working on equipment. They're constantly fixing something. And they work the ground, and they plant the seed, and they put out the fertilizer, they put out the weed killer. They're constantly working, waiting for the harvest, but they're active while they're waiting. They don't just sit. They work for it. And so we are to be patient like a farmer, knowing that our harvest is coming. We work for it. Now, two things that a believer can learn from a farmer. It says here in verse 8, be patient and stand firm. That idea of standing firm, sometimes in the King James it's translated establish. That is to set upon. That is to have our hearts set upon His return like a farmer looks for the harvest. We know when our Master comes that He's bringing all the mercy, all the blessings, all the glory of God with Him. That is the harvest. We are looking forward to that reunion day that is a time of harvest. And we're supposed to be stand firm as we wait on this harvest. And we can't complain and we can't grumble at our situation. It only makes it worse. When the farmer gripes and complains or grumbles about not enough rain, too much rain, not enough sunshine, too much sunshine, all of that's in the Lord's hands. You have to just trust the Lord. Trust that the harvest is coming and continue to do what you can every day as you wait for the harvest. So we learn that from the farmer to make sure that we stand firm and that we don't grumble about our situation. A farmer who does that is one who it gets down in the mouth and he loses his strength and loses his passion for the harvest. So be patient for the Lord's coming back, and be patient like a farmer. But then look in verse number 10. He says this, brothers, as an example of patience in the face of suffering, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. So now he gives us an example. He says, as an example of patience in suffering, think about the prophets. He said, be patient like the prophets. Remember that there are those who have gone before us. There are those who have went through circumstances just like we're going through. There are those who have experienced the same type of hardships that we're experiencing, and they made it through. Those are forefathers that established our church. They had difficulties. They had problems. They faced issues that could be very similar to what we're facing today. But they patiently endured and went forward and looked for the harvest. And they continued. It says here that they continued to speak in the name of the Lord. They didn't allow their circumstance to paralyze them. So remember those who have gone on before us. They faced problems, and some may have even been worse than ours, but they continue to proclaim the truth. And that is our calling right now. When we see what's going on in America, and we see what's going on in churches right now, we could have the temptation to just throw in the towel and just give up and say, well, our ministry, we can't do it like we've always done it. Our ministry is being hampered, and we're not able to make plans and do the things that we thought we were going to be able to do. And so let's just quit. That's the temptation. But here we got to remember the prophets. Those who were in exile, those who were under oppression and persecution, they continued to speak the gospel. They continued to preach the word of the Lord. That is our calling. And I think when we do that, when we continue in that way and we make that our focus, then the hardships we're going through become a lot easier. When we have a purpose, when there's something there that gives us drive and passion, we can make it through any circumstance. And so he wants us to remember the prophets. But then in verse number 11, he brings up another illustration here, another example. He says, of course, as you know, we consider blessed those who have persevered. You have heard of Job's perseverance and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy. We need to be patient, not just because he's coming and not just like a farmer or like a prophet, but we need to be patient like Job. Here was one who suffered more than anyone. The Bible tells us that Job was a man that loved the Lord, and Satan came to God and said, hey, your people just follow you because you bless them. Your people just follow you because you're so wonderful to them. And God said, no, take my servant Job. Yes, he follows me, and yes, I bless him. And Satan said, well, let me have him for a while. Let me test him. Let me just see how strong his faith is. And so God allowed Satan to wreak havoc in Job's life. But Job, even though he suffered more than anyone, he refused to give up. He had friends that tried to encourage him to leave the Lord. He had even times of bouts with depression and bouts with confusion. But it never took him to the point where he was just willing to give up. He continued to trust God even when it was hard, was very difficult. He just continued to place his faith in God. Job had his eyes on the end. Just like the farmer who's looking for the harvest, just like the prophets who were looking for the coming of the Messiah, Job was one who believed in the mercy and the compassion of God. See, it says here, the Lord is full of compassion and mercy. Job realized that. And so even though he was going through difficulty, he remembered the mercy and the compassion of God. And there's no way that he would just give up. He remained faithful, looking forward to that mercy and compassion, that grace that God would give. And God eventually did. God returned to Job more than he had ever lost. Job's faithfulness was rewarded. I know it's difficult to be patient. It's hard for me to be patient right now. I want our church to go right back to normal. I mean, this Sunday, let's just go back to normal. That's what I would love to do. But I've got to be patient. God is teaching us something through all of this turmoil in our world today. God's teaching us something as a church and as individuals that if we'll get hold of it, just continue to keep our eyes on him and continue to go forward, continue to proclaim the word, continue to be faithful, and be patient, long-suffering, forbearing, waiting on the harvest, God's going to bring it. And I do believe there's a harvest coming. I believe that God's going to do something in our church that's not just going to bring a harvest of blessing, but it's going to bring a harvest of souls. I believe that there are lost people, multi-generational lost people that are right now are thinking about their mortality. They're thinking about their forever. They're thinking about their spirituality. They're thinking about God. They're thinking about the Lord. And right now, the ministry that we have through our audio and video and through all the things that we're trying to do to continue to get the message out, I believe God is going to use it for a mighty purpose. And that purpose is going to be to bring a harvest of souls, to bring people to himself. And God wants to use us to do that. So, Concordians, my dear friends, stay patient, stay faithful. Remember, the Lord's coming. Be patient like a farmer, patient like the prophets, and patient like old Job. Because when we patiently wait on God, we can be assured of the harvest. And that's the word out of James chapter 5, verses 7 through 11. I look forward to next week as we close out the book of James. And please don't forget, if you're making a decision or you'd like to just talk to someone, maybe you don't know Jesus and you'd like to understand how you can have a personal relationship with him, you can call me anytime. My number is 479-430-6701. Give me a call. We're here. We're here for you.